London, 1822. The morning mist hung over the streets of London like a veil of secrets, enveloping the mansions of Mayfair in a grey mystery that seemed to reflect the state of mind of Lady Arabella Thornbury. Sitting by the window of her room at number 16 Grosvenor Square, she observed the morning bustle with the empty eyes of someone who had long since ceased to expect anything from life. For years, long years since that fateful night at the Ashford Spring Ball, when Lord Christopher Hartley publicly announced that he could not marry her, not because there was another engagement, not because their families objected, but simply because, in his own words, a union without true love would be a lie that I could not sustain, neither to myself nor to society. His brutal honesty had been like a sharp blade piercing his chest. It would have been easier to bear if he had betrayed her, if there had been scandal or dishonor. But no, Christopher simply looked at her with those compassionate blue eyes and declared that she deserved more than he could offer. His compassion hurt more than any cruelty. Arabella had taken refuge on the family's country estate in Berkshire, Thornbury Manor, where the rolling green hills and tranquil gardens had become both her refuge and her prison. At 27, she was considered a confirmed spinster, a fate she accepted with a resignation that surprised even her younger sister, Penelope. "Lady Arabella, your tea is served," announced Martha, her lady's companion since childhood, entering the room with a silver tray. The middle-aged woman frowned at the sight of her mistress still in her dressing gown. "Your sister is waiting in the living room. She said she has important news." Arabella sighed, turning away from the window. "Penelope always has urgent news. It usually involves some new gentleman she believes is my destiny." Martha gave a small smile as she helped Arabella put on a dark green morning dress. "Your sister only cares about your happiness, madam." "My happiness," repeated Arabella, the term sounding strange in her mouth like a word in a foreign language she had once known, but whose meaning she had forgotten. Penelope Thornbury, at 22, was everything Arabella no longer was. Vibrant, hopeful, with eyes that sparkled when she spoke of balls and suitors. Upon entering the living room, Arabella found her sister practically bouncing in her chair. A newspaper lay open before her. "Bella, finally I need to tell you something." Penelope rose in a whirlwind of peach-colored skirts, her blonde curls dancing around her rosy face. "Lord Blackwood has returned from his business trip to the continent." Arabella poured herself some tea with perfectly controlled hands. "And what does this have to do with me, my dear sister?" "Not at all." Penelope picked up the newspaper and began to read aloud. "The illustrious Duke of Blackwood, Sebastian Aldrich, returns to the capital after 3 years devoted to the affairs of his estates in Kent and the family business in France and Italy. Her Grace, known for its discretion and refinement, is expected for the social season that begins this month." "Penelope," Arabella said calmly, adding sugar to her tea, "I don't see how the arrival of a duke could interest me." Because Penelope approached, her blue eyes gleaming with determination. "Father received a letter from him this morning. The Duke of Blackwood has requested permission to visit you here at Thornbury Manor. He will arrive next week." Arabella nearly dropped her cup. Why would a duke visit our country estate? According to the letter, he is interested in our land adjacent to his. Apparently there is a matter concerning fishing rights on the River Kennet, which runs through both properties. Penelope sat down beside her sister, holding her hand. "But Bella, I've heard rumors about him. They say he's extraordinarily handsome, but distant. That he hasn't courted a lady in years. That something in his past has made him averse to marriage." "Then we're soulmates," Arabella replied bitterly. "Two dead hearts under the same roof. What a charming prospect." "Your heart isn't dead," Penelope insisted, squeezing her sister's hand. "Just asleep, and perhaps this mysterious duke is just the one who can awaken it." Arabella gently withdrew her hand. "Don't fool yourself, Penelope. My heart isn't asleep. It's dead, buried, and I've come to terms with it." But as the week went on, Arabella found herself thinking about the Duke of Blackwood more often than she cared to admit. Not with hope, she assured herself, but with curiosity. What kind of man was he? Why had he remained single, possessing a title and fortune? Was there some romantic tragedy in his past, as in hers? On the morning of the Duke's expected arrival, Arabella saw herself in the mirror for the first time in years. Concerned about her appearance, Martha had noticed the subtle change and had chosen a navy blue velvet dress that enhanced the amber tone of Arabella's eyes and matched her brown hair, which fell in soft waves to her shoulders. "So you look beautiful, madam," commented Martha, pinning a cameo around Arabella's neck. "Just like in the old days." "Don't be silly, Martha," replied Arabella, but her gaze lingered on the reflection for a moment longer. "It is a matter of courtesy to receive a properly dressed visitor." The sound of a carriage in the circular entrance made Arabella's heart race uncomfortably. She descended the stairs with forced dignity, finding her father, Lord Edmund Thornbury, already in the entrance hall, nervously adjusting the slit in his shirt. "Ah, Arabella, how good that you came down," he said. His wrinkled face lit up with relief. "The Duke of Blackwood is an important man. We need to make a good impression." "Father, we are Thornberrys," Arabella reminded him gently. "Our lineage goes back to Norman times. We don't need to impress anyone." Before Lord Edmund could reply, the butler, Hastings, opened the front doors. "His Grace, the Duke of Blackwood." The man who entered was tall, very tall, with broad shoulders beneath an impeccably tailored overcoat. When he removed his hat, it revealed jet black hair, a little too long by fashion standards, suggesting someone unconcerned with conventions. But it was when he looked up that Arabella felt breathless. Green eyes, not just any green, but a deep, intense green, the color of ancient forests. And there was something in them, a melancholy, a hidden pain that she recognized instantly because she saw the same thing in her own reflection every day. "Lord Thornbury," greeted the Duke with an elegant bow, his voice deep and slightly hoarse. "Thank you very much for receiving me at your beautiful estate." "The pleasure is ours, Your Grace," Lord Edmund replied effusively. "Allow me to introduce my eldest daughter, Lady Arabella Thornbury." Sebastian Aldrich turned his green eyes to Arabella, and for an instant, just an instant, she saw surprise in them. Not admiration, not romantic interest, but recognition, as if he saw in her something she saw in him. "Lady Arabella," he said, leaning over her hand, his lips lightly brushing the air above her gloved fingers. "It's an honor." "Your Grace," replied Arabella, her voice firmer than she had expected. "Welcome to Thornbury Manor." When their eyes met again, something passed between them. It wasn't attraction, at least not in the conventional sense. It was a demonstration of understanding. Two survivors of battles of the heart, acknowledging each other's scars. Afternoon tea was served in the main hall where Penelope joined them, her usual conversation filling the potentially awkward silences. The Duke of Blackwood was polite, even attentive. But Arabella noticed that he rarely smiled, and when he did, the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Your estate in Kent is known for its gardens," Penelope remarked, pouring the Duke more tea. "I've heard you possess the largest collection of antique roses in England." "My mother was passionate about roses," Sebastian replied, accepting the cup with a nod. "Before she passed away 6 years ago, she cultivated every variety she could find. I maintain the gardens in her memory." "How sweet," sighed Penelope. "Lady Arabella also loves gardens. She spends hours in our greenhouse." Arabella gave her sister a warning look, but the Duke was already turning to her with genuine interest. "Indeed. Which plants do you prefer, Lady Arabella?" It was a simple question, but no one had asked it in years. No one cared about her preferences, her opinions, her tastes. She was merely the sad spinster of the family, to be tolerated and mercifully forgotten. "Lilies," she replied after a pause, "particularly lilies of the valley. There is something in their fragility, in the way they bloom even in the shadows, that comforts me." Sebastian watched her for a long moment. Flowers that thrive where others cannot. An admirable choice. The conversation flowed more easily after that, moving from gardens to literature and then to music. Arabella discovered, to her surprise, that the Duke was cultured and held strong opinions about the fashionable romantic poets of the time. "Byron is talented, undoubtedly," Sebastian commented, "but there's a certain self-indulgence in his melancholy that I find excessive." "I agree," Arabella said before she could stop herself. Everyone at the table looked at her in surprise. She rarely expressed opinions with such vehemence. There's a difference between feeling genuine pain and making a spectacle of it for the entertainment of others. The Duke's green eyes fixed on her with renewed intensity. Exactly. True pain is private, not performative. Well, interrupted Lord Edmund, visibly uncomfortable with the philosophical turn the conversation was taking. Perhaps we should discuss the issue of fishing rights, Your Grace. Certainly, agreed Sebastian, but his gaze lingered on Arabella for another moment before returning to his host. As the men retired to the office, Penelope gripped Arabella's arm with barely contained excitement. Did you see how he looked at you? How he really saw you? Don't be ridiculous, Arabella said, but her heart was racing. He just likes intelligent conversations. It's more than that, and you know it, Penelope insisted. There's something between you two, a connection. Arabella gently stepped away, heading towards the window. Outside, the March sky was heavy with clouds, promising rain. Even if it rained, what difference would it make? My heart is dead, Penny, and I suspect his is too. Two broken people can't heal. Maybe not. Penelope walked over to her, stopping beside her sister. But perhaps they can learn to live together again. The Duke of Blackwood stayed at Thornbury Manor for 3 days, resolving the fishing rights issue with a diplomatic efficiency that impressed Lord Edmund. But what truly marked those days was the growing intimacy between the Duke and Arabella. It wasn't romance, at least not openly. It was something more subtle, deeper. Long conversations in the library about philosophy and history, silent walks through the gardens, where words became unnecessary, moments of exchanged glances that conveyed so much. On the last night before his departure, Sebastian found Arabella alone in the greenhouse. The full moon cast a silvery light through the glass windows, illuminating the exotic plants and perfuming the air with the scent of jasmine. "Excuse me," he said, stopping in the doorway. "I didn't mean to disturb you. I was told I could find you here." "It's not an intrusion," replied Arabella, averting her gaze from a rare orchid she was contemplating. "This space rarely receives visitors besides myself. It's refreshing to share it." Sebastian approached, his hands clasped behind his back, studying the plants with genuine interest. His collection is impressive. Some of these species are rare, even in London's botanical gardens. "My grandfather was an amateur botanist," explained Arabella, gently touching a fern leaf. "He traveled extensively before he passed away and brought back seeds and seedlings from all over the world. This garden was his legacy, and you keep it alive," observed Sebastian. "There's dedication in that love. There's a purpose," corrected Arabella gently. "When there's nothing else, purpose serves its purpose." The Duke turned to her, the moonlight transforming his face into a sculpture of shadows and angles. "Lady Arabella, may I ask you an impertinent question?" "You may ask, I promise not to answer. Why would a woman of your intelligence, beauty, and grace choose to take refuge here, far from society?" Arabella returned his gaze without hesitation. For the same reason, a young, wealthy duke of good lineage remains single and spends years on the continent. "I suppose it's because sometimes society demands more than we are capable of giving." Sebastian smiled, a genuine smile this time, which reached his eyes and lit them up. "Touché, Mardi." They remained in comfortable silence for a few moments before Arabella asked, "Will you be returning to London?" "Yes. There are unfinished business that can no longer be postponed." He hesitated, then added, "But I've discovered that Berkshire has its charms. Perhaps I'll return more often." "Blackwood's lands are adjacent to ours," Arabella reminded him, keeping her voice carefully neutral. "Surely there will be other matters that will require your attention." Without a doubt, his green eyes stared at her with an intensity that quickened her pulse. "Lady Arabella, may I be frank with you?" "I appreciate the frankness, Your Grace. I didn't come to Thornbury Manor just for the fishing rights," he admitted. "My land manager could have easily taken care of that. I came because I heard rumors about the Thornbury family, about a lady who withdrew from society after a romantic disappointment. A lady who, they said, had sworn never to love again." Arabella felt her blood run cold. "And that intrigued you? Am I an object of morbid curiosity?" "No," Sebastian said quickly, taking a step towards her. "It intrigued me because I recognized my own story, because 5 years ago I too suffered a loss that made me question whether I would ever feel again. She stared at him, too surprised to speak. I was engaged, he continued, his voice low and tense, to Lady Catherine Fairfax. She was kind, cheerful, everything a man could wish for. But weeks before the wedding, she contracted scarlet fever. She died within days in my arms, begging me to promise her that she would find happiness again. Your Grace, Arabella whispered, her hand involuntarily reaching for his. I'm sorry. Sebastian looked at her hand in his, then covered it with his other. I buried my heart with her, Lady Arabella. Or at least that's what I believed. I spent years traveling, working, doing anything to avoid feeling. And it worked. I became exactly what society expected, the somber and distant duke, incapable of genuine emotions. Then why did you come here? She asked, her voice almost a whisper. Why seek out someone equally fragile? He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her fingers delicately. Because these 3 days have shown me something I thought impossible, that my heart isn't dead, just waiting. Waiting for someone who understands, who doesn't expect me to be something I can't be. Arabella felt tears welling up in her eyes, but refused to let them fall. And you believe I'm that person? I believe we both deserve the chance to find out. Sebastian stepped forward, so close she could feel his warmth, his subtle scent, or something uniquely masculine. I am not asking for love, Lady Arabella. I am not promising burning passion or eternal devotion. I am simply asking if you would consider allowing two broken people to try to find some purpose together. It was the strangest and, at the same time, most honest proposal Arabella had ever heard. No empty promises, no romantic declarations, just the stark truth. I need time, she said finally, to think, to be sure. Of course, he replied, taking a step back and letting go of her hand. I'll be in London for the next few weeks, but I'll write to you if you'll allow me. Just correspondence, no pressure, no expectations. Arabella nodded, her mind racing. That would be acceptable. When Sebastian left the next morning, Arabella watched his carriage disappear down the road with conflicting feelings. Part of her wanted to run after him, to immediately accept his strange and sincere request. Another part, the one that had been so deeply hurt 4 years before, pleaded for caution. The first letter arrived 3 days later. It was neither romantic nor effusive. Sebastian wrote about London, about social obligations he found tedious, about a new book of poetry he had bought and pondered. It was a conversation on paper, nothing more, nothing less, Arabella replied, describing the conservatory, a new species of lily that had begun to bloom, and her impressions of the latest novel she had read. She formally signed with affection and esteem, Lady Arabella Thornbury. The letters continued, 1 or 2 a week. Gradually they became more personal. Sebastian wrote about his childhood, about the pressure of inheriting the dukedom at a young age after his father's sudden death. Arabella shared memories of her mother, who had died giving birth to Penelope, leaving her with a younger sister to raise. I think we become adults too soon, Sebastian wrote in a letter, and we forget how to simply be human. 6 weeks passed before he mentioned returning to Berkshire. There are matters on my lands that require personal attention, he wrote, and I confess I missed the conversations I only found at Thornbury Manor. Would it be presumptuous of me to ask permission to visit you again? Arabella held the letter for a long time before replying. Her heart, that organ she had sworn was dead, pounded with something dangerously close to expectation. Your visit would be most welcome, she wrote back, and for the first time in years she took her leave with something beyond cold formality, with a growing friendship, Arabella. When Sebastian returned to Thornbury Manor, spring was in full bloom. The gardens were awash with vibrant colours, the air perfumed with roses and lilacs. Arabella greeted him at the entrance wearing a lavender muslin dress that Penelope had insisted would accentuate her eyes. Your Grace, she greeted him with a curtsy. Lady Arabella, he replied, and this time when their eyes met, there was a warmth there that hadn't existed before. Not passion, perhaps, but something genuine, something real. During this visit, Lord Edmund suggested that the Duke stay for a whole week to enjoy the spring weather. Sebastian readily accepted, and Arabella was genuinely happy with the news. They settled into a comfortable routine. Mornings were spent riding around the grounds, with Penelope often accompanying as a lively chaperone. Afternoons were devoted to reading in the library or strolling through the gardens. Evenings involved formal dinners, followed by music in the drawing room, where Arabella discovered that Sebastian played the cello with surprising skill. "My mother insisted," he explained, adjusting the instrument between his knees. "She said a gentleman should appreciate the arts, not just patronize them." Arabella sat at the piano, her fingers finding the keys with a familiarity born of years of solitary practice. "How about a Mozart sonata?" They played together, and for the first time in years Arabella felt something beyond emptiness. The music flowed between them, a silent, harmonious, and understanding conversation. When the last note faded, Penelope, seated as an observer, applauded enthusiastically. "Magnificent! You should perform in the ballrooms of London." "I'm afraid that would be too much for my temperament," said Arabella with a small smile, "and for mine as well." Sebastian agreed, his eyes meeting hers in mutual understanding. It was on the 5th night of their stay that everything changed. After dinner, while Penelope and Lord Edmund played cards in the small drawing room, Sebastian invited Arabella for a moonlit stroll through the gardens. "That's inappropriate," she protested weakly, though she was already reaching for her shawl. "Your father can watch us through the windows," Sebastian remarked. "And after 6 weeks of correspondence, I believe we've overcome a few minor conventions." They walked in silence at first, the night air perfumed with honeysuckle and the distant call of a nocturnal gale. The nearly full moon cast enough silvery light to illuminate the path. "Lady Arabella," Sebastian began, but stopped, correcting himself. "Arabella, may I call you that?" "You may," she replied softly, "and may I call you Sebastian? I would very much like that." He paused beneath an archway covered in climbing roses, turning to face her. "These weeks, these letters, this time together, have shown me something I didn't believe was possible." Arabella's heart raced. "Yes, my heart wasn't dead, just asleep, as your sister so wisely suggested." He took her hands, his thumbs tracing soft circles over her palms. "You awakened it, Arabella, not with dramatic passion or grand pronouncements, but with understanding, with patience, with a gentleness I never expected to find again in this world." Arabella felt tears threatening to fall, but this time she didn't hold them back. "Sebastian, I don't know if I'm capable of loving again. What Christopher did, the way he rejected me publicly, destroyed something in me." "I know," he said gently, wiping away a lone tear with his thumb. "And I'm not asking for love. Not yet. I'm asking for a chance, an opportunity to rebuild together what was broken within us. But what if we never feel that burning passion that poets speak of?" she asked, her voice choked with emotion. "What if we are only capable of this deep friendship, and nothing more?" Sebastian smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his austere face. "Then we will have something that most people spend their entire lives searching for and never find. We will have true understanding, genuine companionship." And who knows, he leaned closer, his forehead touching hers. "Perhaps with time something more will blossom." "That's the most unusual proposal I've ever heard," said Arabella, letting out a broken laugh. "We are unusual people," replied Sebastian. "We deserve an unusual marriage proposal." He took a step back, his green eyes serious. "Arabella Thornbury, would you do me the honor of becoming my Duchess? I promise no instant passion or eternal love. But I promise respect, understanding and space for us to heal together." It was imperfect. It was sincere. It was exactly what Arabella needed to hear. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Sebastian, I accept." When he kissed her, it was a soft, almost hesitant kiss. It wasn't the passionate kiss of the novels Penelope loved to read, but it was real. And in that instant, Arabella felt something awaken in her chest. Not love, not yet, but the possibility of him. And that, she discovered, was enough. The engagement announcement caused a sensation in London. The Duke of Blackwood and the reclusive Lady Thornbury. The newspapers speculated profusely, some benevolent, others not so much. But Sebastian and Arabella cared little. They had each other, and that was all that mattered. The wedding preparations were kept simple at their insistence. No grand celebration in London, no hundreds of guests. Just an intimate ceremony in the chapel of Thornbury Manor, followed by a small banquet for family and close friends. The only shadow over Arabella's happiness appeared 2 weeks before the wedding, when a letter arrived addressed to her in handwriting she immediately recognized, Christopher Hartley. With trembling hands, she opened the letter. "Dear Arabella," it began, "I heard about your engagement and feel obligated to write. Please understand that I never intended to hurt you. My refusal to proceed with our marriage did not reflect your lack of courage, but rather my own cowardice. Now I see that I made a terrible mistake. You deserved honesty from the start, not public humiliation. I wish you all the happiness with the Duke of Blackwood. He is a lucky man. Yours sincerely, Christopher." Arabella read the letter 3 times, hoping to feel something. Anger, perhaps, or satisfaction with his change of attitude. But all she felt was a distant indifference. Christopher Hartley was part of her past. A page was turned in a chapter already closed. She took the letter to Sebastian that same afternoon when he came for tea. Without saying a word, she handed him the paper. He read it silently, clenching his jaw slightly. "How do you feel?" he asked when he finished, returning the letter. "Nothing," Arabella replied honestly. "It's like receiving news from someone I met briefly a long time ago. He no longer has power over me, Sebastian." Her shoulders visibly relaxed. "That's all right, because for a moment I feared I still harbored feelings for him." Arabella took his hand, intertwining their fingers. "My heart may have been dead, but when it began to awaken, it was only for you." Sebastian pulled her into his arms, embracing her tightly. "I don't deserve your grace, Arabella." "Nor I yours," she murmured against his chest. "But perhaps that's what makes you perfect." The wedding day dawned clear and golden, a rare June day without a cloud in the sky. Arabella woke earlier than usual, her heart pounding with nervousness and something that felt suspiciously like happiness. Martha helped her put on the dress, a process that took hours. The wedding dress was a simple yet elegant creation of ivory satin with delicate lace on the sleeves and neckline. There were none of the excessive frills and embellishments that fashion dictated, just clean lines that enhanced Arabella's graceful figure. "You look radiant, my lady," said Martha. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Your mother would be so proud." Penelope entered the room in a whirlwind of pink silk, her bridesmaid dress billowing around her. "Bella, it's almost time." "And you look absolutely stunning." "I'm nervous," admitted Arabella, her hands trembling slightly as Martha adjusted a lace veil over her hair, which was styled in loose curls. "It's natural," assured Penelope, holding her sister's hands. "But remember, it's Sebastian who's waiting for you down there. Sebastian who understands you like no one else." The small Thornbury chapel was simply decorated with white lilies and sprigs of foliage. The pews accommodated only 30 guests, close family, and a few dear friends. But when Arabella entered arm in arm with her father, she saw only a man. Sebastian stood at the altar, impeccably dressed in black, his green eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her hold her breath for a moment. And when he smiled, a genuine and complete smile, Arabella felt something fundamentally change within her. Her heart was no longer just awakening. It was alive, pulsing, and feeling. The ceremony unfolded like a dream. The vicar's words, the whispered answers, the feeling of Sebastian's hand holding hers as if it were the most precious thing in the world. When the moment came to exchange vows, Sebastian surprised her. "Arabella," he said, his voice low but clear enough for everyone to hear. "I promise you honesty always, even when the truth is difficult. I promise to honor your past pain and never demand more than you can give. I promise to build a life with you where we can both feel whole again. And I promise that if my heart ever forgets how to love, I will look at you and remember." Tears streamed freely down Arabella's face as she replied, "Sebastian, I promise understanding, for I know the pain you carry. I promise patience while we both heal. I promise to build a home where you can simply be human, not a title or an expectation. And I promise that, even when I am afraid, I will choose courage, because you taught me that living again is worth the risk." When the vicar declared them husband and wife, the kiss they exchanged was deeper, more passionate than that first one in the garden. And for the first time, Arabella felt not only the possibility of love, but its reality. The banquet was joyful, filled with laughter and toasts. Lord Edmund spoke with emotion about seeing his daughter find happiness again. As the afternoon wore on, Sebastian took Arabella to dance. It was a waltz, and for the first time in 4 years, Arabella danced without feeling the judgmental gazes of society upon her. There was only Sebastian, his hand firm on her waist, his green eyes fixed on hers. "Regret?" he asked softly. "Not for a moment," she replied, and it was true. "You never." He turned her gracefully. "Arabella, I need to tell you something. Try. When I asked you to marry me, I said I couldn't promise a love we might never feel." He paused, his eyes searching hers. "I was wrong." Arabella's heart raced. "Sebastian, I love you," he said simply. "I don't know when it happened. Maybe it was gradual, through all those letters and conversations. Or maybe it was that first day at the conservatory when I recognized my soulmate. But I love you, Arabella, completely and irrevocably." The tears returned, but this time they were of pure joy. "I love you too," she whispered. "I thought my heart was dead, but you brought it back to life." Sebastian stopped dancing right there in the middle of the ballroom, in front of all the guests, and kissed her deeply. There was applause and some amused laughter, but no one noticed. They were lost in each other, two hearts that had been dead, now beating in perfect sync. Later that night, as they rode off in their carriage to the Blackwood estate in Kent, where they would spend their honeymoon, Arabella gazed out the window at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "What are you thinking about?" asked Sebastian, his arm around her, shielding her from the night's chill. "I'm thinking about how strange life is," she replied, leaning against him. "Months ago, I was convinced I would spend the rest of my days alone, my heart buried along with my hopes. And now. She turned to look at him, her face illuminated only by the moonlight streaming through the carriage window. "And now, I feel truly alive for the first time in years. It's as if everything I've been through, all the pain and loneliness, had a purpose. It all led me to you." Sebastian kissed her forehead tenderly. "I feel the same. Catherine asked me to find happiness again. It took 5 years, but I finally fulfilled my promise to her. And I found much more than happiness. I found peace, purpose, love." They rode in comfortable silence for a while. The gentle sway of the carriage and the rhythmic tapping of the horses' hooves created an atmosphere of intimacy. Arabella felt safer than ever, nestled in her husband's arms. "Sebastian," she finally said, "can I ask you a question?" "Anything." "When did you know you loved me?" "You said you weren't sure when it happened, but there must have been some moment when you knew." He pondered for a long moment. "Do you remember that afternoon in the library when we discussed Kay's philosophy?" "Yes. You argued that pure reason was insufficient without empirical experience, and you challenged me brilliantly." Sebastian smiled into the darkness. "At that moment, when your eyes shone with intellectual passion, when you forgot to be the reserved and sad lady, and simply were yourself, completely alive and present, I knew. Perhaps it wasn't love yet, but it was the moment I knew I could love again and that it would be you." Arabella felt her heart overflow. "For me, it was when you played the cello. There was so much emotion in your music, so much vulnerability. I saw the man behind the title, and he was magnificent." "We're being extraordinarily sentimental," Sebastian remarked humorously. "We're newlyweds," Arabella replied, laughing softly. "I suppose that's allowed." The Blackwood estate in Kent was even more impressive than Arabella had imagined. The mansion was immense, built of light-colored stone that gleamed golden under the late afternoon sun when the twilight almost obscured the day. But what truly caught her attention were the gardens, hectares upon hectares of meticulously tended gardens, exactly as Penelope had described, and at the center of it all, her late mother-in-law's rose garden, still in full bloom, a sea of color and fragrance that took Arabella's breath away. "It's stunning," she whispered, as Sebastian helped her down from the carriage. "My mother used to spend hours here," Sebastian said, his voice choked with emotion at the memory. "She used to say that roses were like people, each one unique, each one requiring different care but all capable of extraordinary beauty, if loved as they should be." Arabella intertwined her fingers with his. "I wish I had known her." "She would have adored you," Sebastian assured her. "Just as I adore you." The first few days at Blackwood were a revelation, away from the prying eyes of society, away from expectations and conventions. Sebastian and Arabella could simply be themselves. They spent their mornings exploring the gardens, their afternoons in Blackwood's vast library, and their evenings discovering each other. There was no more hesitation between them, no trace of the fear they had both carried for so long. When they made love, it was with tenderness and passion intertwined, each touch an affirmation that they were alive, complete, capable of feeling everything. And love grew stronger each day between them. Each day they got to know each other intimately, strengthened a love they had never felt before, and little by little the past was left behind, no longer even mentioned. They adored each other's company, and during one of their walks and conversations at the end of the afternoon she reflected, "Suffering," Arabella said, "teaches us things that no formal education could." Arabella and Sebastian felt a profound peace. There were no more shadows between them, no unspoken secrets. They were completely honest with each other, and in that honesty they found true freedom. The weeks in Blackwood flew by. June gave way to July, and it was time to return to London to fulfill certain social engagements. Arabella confessed to being nervous about facing society again, this time as Duchess of Blackwood. "Everyone will be watching," she said on the morning of her departure as Martha packed her things. "Judging, hoping I'll fail." Sebastian, leaning elegantly against the doorframe, smiled. "Let them watch, let them judge. You are the Duchess of Blackwood now, Arabella, and I will be by your side every step of the way." London in July was stiflingly hot, the city thick with cold smoke and unpleasant odours. But the Blackwood residence in Grosvenor Square was elegant and sophisticated, and the staff welcomed the new Duchess with warm approval. The first major test came 2 days after her arrival. Lady Peaton, one of London's most influential hostesses, sent an invitation to a summer ball. It was, as everyone knew, a test. If the new Duchess of Blackwood attended and was accepted, her position in society would be assured. "You don't have to go if you don't want to," Sebastian said as they examined the invitation over breakfast. "I can send our apologies." Arabella pondered for a long moment. The old Arabella, the one who had hidden away at Thornbury Manor for 4 years, would have refused immediately. But she was no longer that woman. "No," she said finally, lifting her chin. "Yes, I will go. I will face society and show everyone that Lady Arabella Thornbury is no longer dead. She has been reborn as the Duchess of Blackwood." The pride in Sebastian's eyes was gratifying. "This is my Duchess." On the night of the ball, Arabella dressed impeccably. She chose an emerald green silk dress that perfectly matched Sebastian's eyes and enhanced her own. Her hair was styled in an elegant way that left her neck exposed, where she wore an emerald necklace that had belonged to Sebastian's mother. "You look magnificent," Sebastian said as she descended the stairs. He himself was impeccably dressed in black and white, a powerful duke in every sense. "I'm terrified," she admitted softly. "I know," he offered her his arm. "But remember, you are not alone. You will never be again." Lady Peaton's ballroom was packed when they arrived. The instant they were announced, His Grace the Duke of Blackwood and Her Grace the Duchess of Blackwood, conversation ceased. All eyes turned to them. Arabella felt the old fear trying to overwhelm her, but then Sebastian pressed her hand against the curve of his arm, a small but comforting gesture. She took a deep breath and walked into the hall with her head held high. Lady Peaton hastened to greet them, her expression revealing genuine approval. "Your Grace, Duchess," she said warmly. "What a pleasure to have you here. Your beauty and grace are even more impressive than the rumours suggested." It was a public endorsement, and Arabella felt the tension in the air visibly lessen. If Lady Peaton approved of the new Duchess, Others would follow. The evening passed in a whirlwind of introductions and polite conversation. Arabella discovered that being Duchess of Blackwood gave her a kind of armor that Lady Arabella Thornbury had never possessed. People treated her with respect and distinction. It was during the third waltz that she saw him, Christopher Hartley, standing at the edge of the dance floor watching her. Her heart didn't race, her hands didn't tremble. She simply noticed his presence with the same indifference she would show any other stranger. "He's here," Sebastian murmured, following her gaze. "I know," Arabella replied calmly. "It doesn't matter. Do you want me to make him leave?" "No." She looked at her husband, love shining in her eyes. "Let him stay. Let him see how happy I am. Let him understand that the power he had over me died a long time ago." When the waltz ended, Christopher approached. Arabella noticed nervousness in his eyes, perhaps even regret. "Excuse me, Duchess Blackwood," he greeted her with a deep bow. "May I grant you a moment?" Sebastian tensed beside her, but Arabella remained calm. "Mr. Hartley, of course." Christopher glanced nervously at Sebastian, who made no move to offer them privacy. "I wanted to personally congratulate you on your wedding and also ask for your forgiveness for my behavior 4 years ago." Arabella observed the man who had once broken her heart. He looked older, more tired. There were worry lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Your apology is accepted," she said gently. "The past is the past, Mr. Hartley. We've both moved on with our lives." "You've always been too generous," Christopher said softly. "I was foolish," Arabella corrected gently, "and although your honesty hurt at the time, it freed me to find my true happiness." She looked at Sebastian, who watched the conversation with a carefully neutral expression. "I have found a man who loves me for who I am, and not in spite of who I am. For that, Mr. Hartley, I must thank you." Christopher paled slightly, but nodded with dignity. "Then I wish you all the happiness, Duchess. You deserve no less." He bowed again and withdrew. "That was extraordinarily magnanimous," commented Sebastian when they were alone again. "It was liberating," replied Arabella. "For 4 years I allowed that man and that moment to define my life. Enough. My story doesn't begin or end with Christopher Hartley. It continues with me, with you, with our future together." Sebastian pulled her into his arms right there in the middle of the ballroom and kissed her deeply. There were some scandalized murmurs, but of a much more romantic tone. "I love you," he said when they parted. "More than I ever imagined it was possible to love someone." "And I love you," replied Arabella, her heart so full that it seemed impossible to contain her joy. The following months were filled with pure happiness. Arabella flourished in her role as Duchess of Blackwood. She and Sebastian divided their time between London, where they received visitors and fulfilled social obligations, and Blackwood Hall, where they could simply be a loving couple. In the autumn, Arabella discovered she was pregnant. The news filled Sebastian with an almost childlike joy. He insisted that she get plenty of rest, which Arabella found sometimes touching, sometimes exasperating. "Sebastian, I'm pregnant, not disabled," she protested, when he tried to stop her from taking her daily walk in the gardens. "I know that," he said, looking a little embarrassed. "It's just that I've lost people I loved, and I can't lose you too." Arabella softened immediately, cupping his face in her hands. "You won't lose me. I'm strong, and our child will be too. But I need you to trust me. Everything will be all right." He nodded, kissing her palm. "You're right. Forgive my overcaution." "You're forgiven," she said with a smile. "But you're coming with me on the walk." As they strolled through the autumn gardens with golden leaves falling around them, Arabella reflected on how far they had come and felt so happy it was almost like living an impossible dream. Less than a year ago, she was a broken woman, hiding from the world, convinced her heart was dead. Now she was a beloved wife, a mother-to-be, a woman who looked to the future with hope, not fear. "What are you thinking about?" Sebastian asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "About miracles," she replied. "About how sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from the most unexpected places. How can a heart be dead and still learn to beat again?" Sebastian paused, turning her to face him. The golden autumn light bathed her dark hair and made her green eyes sparkle. It wasn't a miracle, Arabella. It was a choice. You chose to try again. You chose to risk your heart once more. And that courage, that will to live despite the fear, is more admirable than any miracle. Tears, something common in pregnancy, filled Arabella's eyes. We chose Sebastian, the two of us. We chose to heal. We chose love. We chose life. He then kissed her gently, tenderly, as if she were the most precious thing in the world. And at that moment, surrounded by the colors of her home, with the promise of a new life blossoming among them, Arabella knew with absolute certainty that her heart was not only alive, but also complete. Winter arrived, bringing snow that transformed Blackwood Hall into something out of a fairy tale. Arabella, now visibly pregnant, spent her days reading by the fireplace, embroidering for the baby's room, and writing letters to Penelope, who was engaged to a respectable young gentleman. One January afternoon, as the snow fell gently outside, Arabella sat in the greenhouse Sebastian had built especially for her. It was smaller than the one at Thornbury Manor, but perfectly adequate, filled with lilies and other plants she adored. Sebastian found her there, seated in a comfortable chair, one hand on her rounded belly, a book forgotten in her lap. "Comfortable?" he asked, sitting on the arm of her chair. "Perfectly," she smiled. "Your child is particularly active today. I believe he or she will be a strong boy like their father, or a strong girl like their mother," Sebastian suggested, placing his hand over hers. Feeling the baby kick, they sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, watching the snow fall through the glass windows. "Sebastian," Arabella said finally, "there's something I want to tell you." "Tell me." "When we met, you offered me something I thought was enough: companionship, understanding, a path to healing together." She turned to look at him. "But we received so much more than that. We received true love, passion, a joy I never believed possible again." "I feel the same," said Sebastian, his voice choked with emotion. "But here's what I really want to say," she continued. "Even if we hadn't found that passion, even if our marriage had been only what we promised each other in that garden, it still would have been enough. Because what we've built together, this deep friendship, this mutual respect, this understanding is the foundation of everything else." Sebastian knelt before her, ignoring her protest. He took her hands in his, kissing each one. "Arabella Thornbury, who is now Arabella Aldrich, Duchess of Blackwood," he said solemnly, "you have not only brought life to my life, you have shown me what it means to truly live and love. Every day with you is a gift I never imagined I deserved." "We deserve it," said Arabella firmly. "After everything we've been through, all these years of pain and loneliness, we deserve this happiness," Sebastian said. He kissed her deeply, one hand on her face and the other resting gently on her belly, where their child was growing. And in that kiss lay the promise of the future that awaited them. Spring brought not only flowers, but also the birth of their son. Lady Catherine Arabella Aldrich arrived in the world one March morning with strong lungs and dazzling dark curly hair. Sebastian wept as he held her for the first time, tears of joy streaming freely down his face. "She's perfect," he whispered in amazement, "just like her mother." Arabella, exhausted but radiant, watched her husband with their daughter and felt her heart overflow with joy once more. Blackwood Hall filled with the sounds of a child. Arabella blossomed in her role as a mother, discovering reserves of strength and love she didn't know she possessed. Sebastian was a devoted father, often found in the baby's room late into the night, simply watching his daughter sleep. One summer afternoon, with their daughter already 3 months old, Arabella and Sebastian sat on the terrace, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. The baby slept peacefully in the portable crib beside them, occasionally making small sounds of contentment. "Do you remember," Sebastian said softly, "that first day I arrived at Thornbury Manor? How cautious and reserved we both were." "I remember," Arabella replied, finding his hand. "Two strangers with broken hearts pretending to be made of stone. And now look at us," he said, gesturing to the tranquil scene. "A family, a life together, more happiness than I ever imagined." Arabella turned to look at him, the light of the setting sun gilding his profile. Someday we will tell our daughter how we met, about our broken hearts and how we healed them. The time together has done us so much good, and I will certainly tell her how her mother was the bravest woman I have ever known, someone that life sweetly gave me with the sole purpose of loving unconditionally, and I hope I am fulfilling my role well. Well, I'll tell you how your father, a strong, upright and admirable man, brought me healing and redemption, and will certainly teach you true love. Will turn you into an incurable romantic. Arabella chuckled softly, telling stories of how love conquers all. It doesn't conquer all, Sebastian corrected thoughtfully, but it makes everything bearable. And when you find the right person, life becomes extraordinary. The little baby chose that moment to wake up, her green eyes so similar to her father's, opening to look around with wonder. Arabella took her daughter in her arms, cradling her against her chest. "Hello, little one," she murmured. "Did you wake up to see the sunset?" Sebastian embraced his wife and daughter, feeling a profound peace he had never imagined possible. This was his family. This was his home. And everything felt so real, and he was immensely grateful for everything that had brought them there. The years passed in tranquil happiness. Anne grew into a lively and curious girl, followed 2 years later by a brother, Edmund Sebastian, who inherited his mother's amber eyes and his father's calm temperament. Blackwood Hall was always filled with children's laughter and the joyful bustle of family life. Arabella became known throughout the county for her kindness and charitable works. She founded a school for the children of the rural estates and a dispensary for the sick. Her reputation as a generous and wise duchess spread far beyond Kent. Sebastian, in turn, prospered with the love of his family. The once somber and distant man became known for his easy laughter and affectionate nature. He divided his time between managing his vast estates and being present for his wife and children. Penelope married and had children of her own, frequently visiting Blackwood Hall with her growing family. Lord Edmund, already advanced in years, spent summers with them, delighting in his grandchildren. It was during one of these summers, when Anne was 8 and Edmund 6, that the girl asked a question Arabella knew would eventually come. "Mum," Anne asked, as they were in the rose garden, "how did you know I loved Daddy?" Arabella paused. While pruning the flowers, she carefully considered her answer. Anne was precocious for her age, thoughtful and observant like her father. "It was gradual, dear," she replied honestly. "It wasn't love at first sight, like in fairy tales. It was something that grew slowly, like those roses." "But how did you know for sure?" the girl insisted, her green eyes serious. Arabella sat on the stone bench, pulling Anne onto her lap, even though the girl was already getting too big for it. "I knew when I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. You see, Anne, before I met your father, my heart was so broken. Someone hurt me deeply, and I thought I would never be able to love again." "How did you hurt your knee when you fell out of the tree?" Edmund asked, joining them. He was always around when they told stories. "Exactly." Then Arabella smiled. "Only it was my heart instead of my knee, and when it finally healed thanks to your father's love and patience, I knew I could love again without fear." "Did Daddy also have his heart broken?" Anne asked softly. "Yes, my little one, he did. But he and I healed each other, and from that healing arose the deepest and truest love, and you are the fruit of that love." Anne seemed to reflect deeply on this. "When I grow up, I want to find someone like Daddy found you." "And I hope you find someone," said Arabella, kissing the top of her daughter's head. "Someone who truly sees you, who values you, who makes your heart feel safe enough to love." Sebastian, who watched everything from the office window. His wife had become not only the woman he loved, but also a wise and loving mother, teaching their children lessons of love and resilience that would serve them throughout their lives. That night, after the children fell asleep, Sebastian and Arabella sat together in the bedroom, as they did every night before going to sleep. It was their sacred and inviolable time, when they talked about their day, shared worries and hopes, and simply enjoyed each other's company. "I overheard your conversation with Anne today," said Sebastian, brushing Arabella's long hair, a nightly ritual they both cherished. "Did you know I was listening? "I always know where you are," she replied with a smile. "You are the north of my compass." Arabella turned to him, taking the brush from his hands. "Sebastian Aldrich, after all these years, you can still make my heart race with your words." "That's good," he said, pulling her into his arms, "because I intend to keep doing that for many more years." They kissed, the kiss of a couple who knew each other's every curve and shape, but who had never lost that spark of passion and desire. When they parted, both were breathless. "Do you remember?" Arabella said, tracing the line of his jaw with delicate fingers. "When I asked you how you knew you loved me in the conservatory at Thornbury?" "Yes. And you said it was when I questioned you about Kant." She smiled. "I still remember that often." Sebastian held her hand, kissing her palm. "Every moment with you is a gift, Arabella. Even the challenging ones, even the difficult ones, because we go through them together." "Together," she repeated, snuggling closer to him. "That was the most important word in our lives, wasn't it?" "It was," he agreed, "and it always will be." They remained like that for a long time, enveloped in the comfort of each other's presence, until finally they went to bed, where they fell asleep intertwined as they always did. The years continued to pass, bringing their joys and sorrows. Lord Edmund passed away peacefully in his sleep when Anne was 12 years old, leaving behind a deep sense of loss, but also a legacy of love and happy memories. Anne blossomed into a young woman of extraordinary beauty and intelligence. By the age of 17, she already had several suitors, but none seemed suitable in her eyes or those of her parents. She awaited her own duke, heartbroken. One night, Arabella teased Sebastian after Anne politely turned down yet another suitor. "God help us," Sebastian sighed dramatically. "A daughter with her mother's romanticism and her father's stubbornness." "She'll know when she finds the right person," Arabella assured him. "Just like we knew. Edmund at 15 was more pragmatic than his sister. He was interested in the affairs of the estate and often accompanied his father on his rounds, absorbing knowledge with the quiet determination that characterized the Aldrichs family." One autumn afternoon, almost 20 years after their marriage, Arabella found herself alone in the rose garden. Her children were with their guardians. Sebastian was in London on business, and for the first time in a long time, she had a moment truly alone with her thoughts. She walked slowly among the rose bushes, many of them planted by Catherine Fairfax. There was no jealousy in her heart as she thought of Sebastian's first love. Instead, there was gratitude. Catherine Fairfax had loved Sebastian enough to set him free, to ask him to find happiness again, and from that final act of generosity, Arabella had received the greatest gift of her life. "Thank you," she whispered to the white roses Catherine had planted, "for loving him enough to let him go, for giving me the chance to love him too. Talking to the flowers, my dear." Arabella turned and found Sebastian standing at the garden entrance, having returned from London earlier than expected. His hair now had silver streaks at the temples, and there were wrinkles around his eyes, but to her he was as handsome as the day she had met him. "I was just thanking Catherine," she admitted without embarrassment. "How was London?" Arabella asked, changing the subject as they began to walk together. "Boring without you," he replied, "but productive. I finalized the contracts for the new textile factory. It will be great for the local economy and will provide well-paying jobs." "Always thinking of others," Arabella said proudly. "It's one of the many reasons why I love you." Sebastian paused, turning her to face him. The golden sunset light bathed her face, making her amber eyes sparkle like jewels. "Arabella, there's something I want to tell you. Try. I thank you every day for your courage," he said sincerely, "for the courage you had that first day when you decided not to reject me immediately. Without that courage, I would still be lost, half alive, existing but not truly living." Arabella's eyes filled with tears. Even after so many years, he still managed to deeply touch her with his words. "And I thank you for your honesty, for not promising me things you couldn't deliver, for being sincere with me from the beginning. That made everything possible." They kissed there, among the roses that had witnessed so many moments of their lives. That night, during the family dinner, Anne made an announcement. "I've met someone," she said, her face blushing delicately. "His name is Lord Henry Ashworth. He is the second son of the Earl of Devonshire." Arabella and Sebastian exchanged glances. "Tell us about him," Arabella encouraged gently. "He's kind," Anne began, her eyes shining, "and intelligent. He doesn't treat me like an ornament, but talks to me about ideas, about books, about the world. And when he's with me, I feel—" She hesitated, searching for the right words. "Like his heart is safe," Sebastian suggested softly. Catherine looked at her father, surprised. "Exactly. How did you know?" "Because that's how I feel about your mother," he replied, reaching across the table to take Arabella's hand. "That's how true love should be." Edmund rolled his eyes dramatically. "You two are incredibly sentimental, but I suppose it's better than the other way around." "One day, young man," Arabella said with a smile, "you'll find someone who will make your heart feel things you never imagined possible. And then you'll understand. If that means I have to become as sentimental as you, I'd rather stay single," Edmund declared, making everyone laugh. But Arabella saw the curiosity in his eyes, the growing desire to understand what his parents had, and knew that when his time came, he too would find his way to love. Lord Henry Ashworth proved to be exactly as Anne had described. When Sebastian and Arabella formally met him, they immediately perceived the genuine affection in his eyes as he looked at their daughter. And more importantly, they saw how Anne blossomed in his presence. "He reminds me of you," Arabella said to Sebastian after Henry left, following his first formal visit to Blackwood Hall. "There is the same honesty, the same depth. As long as he treats our daughter with the love and respect she deserves," said Sebastian, in his protective, paternal voice, "he has my blessing." The engagement was announced in the autumn of that year, and the wedding was planned for the following spring. Arabella found herself involved in wedding preparations for the second time in her life, but this time as the mother of the bride. "Are you happy?" she asked Anne one evening, as they discussed fabrics for the wedding dress. "More than I ever imagined possible," Anne replied. "Mum, now I understand what you and Dad have." "It's rare, isn't it?" "Very rare," Arabella agreed, "and precious beyond measure. Take good care of it, my dear. Feed her every day with love, honesty, and respect." "Just like you and Daddy did," Anne said, hugging her mother. "You showed me what true love is. You set a standard for me that's impossible to reach, but I'm grateful for it." Tears streamed down Arabella's face. "It's not impossible, my dear, just rare. And you found it." Anne's wedding was a magnificent event. Blackwood Chapel was filled with spring flowers, and the bride was radiant in her satin and lace dress. But the moment that would forever be etched in Arabella's memory was when Sebastian led his daughter down the aisle. Father and daughter stopped halfway, and Sebastian whispered something in Anne's ear that made her laugh through her tears. Then he kissed her cheek and handed her over to Henry Ashworth, a clearly smitten and reverent young man. When Sebastian returned to the bench beside Arabella, she saw tears in his eyes. She took his hand, squeezing it gently. "Our girl," he whispered. "She found her own happy ending," Arabella added, "just like us." In the years that followed, Anne and Henry had 3 children. Edmund married a kind and determined young woman who challenged him intellectually, and Blackwood Hall became the heart of a constantly expanding family. Sebastian and Arabella became devoted grandparents, delighting in their grandchildren with the wisdom and patience that only age brings. They still spent every night together, talking, sharing experiences, simply being there for each other. It was on a winter's night, almost 30 years after their wedding, that Arabella found Sebastian in the rose garden, now covered in snow. He stood before Catherine Fairfax's white roses, deep in thought. "Sebastian," she called softly, approaching him, "are you all right? It's very cold out here." He turned to her, and she saw that his face was wet with tears. "I was thinking about all the years that might never have happened," he said. "If I hadn't had the courage to visit Thornbury Manor, if you hadn't had the courage to accept me, all this happiness, our children, grandchildren, our whole life together, might never have existed." Arabella hugged him tightly. "But it happened. It happened because we both chose courage instead of fear. We chose to try instead of giving up." "I love you so much," Sebastian murmured against her hair, now speckled with silver. "More now than when we got married. more every day. "And I love you," Arabella replied. Two hearts that survived pain, found healing, and built a life of extraordinary love. The snow fell softly around them, but they didn't feel the cold. All they felt was each other's warmth. When they finally returned inside, to the warmth of the fireplace and the sound of their grandchildren playing in the living room, Arabella looked back one last time at the rose garden. In spring, the roses would bloom again as they always did, and they'd be there to see them together as they always have been. Because some loves are like gardens. They require patience, care, and constant dedication. But when properly cultivated, they blossom into something of unparalleled beauty. Something that endures through the seasons, through the years, through a lifetime. And so it was with the love of Sebastian and Arabella. A love that began with two hearts closed to love, but that transformed into something more alive, more vibrant, more true than either of them had ever imagined possible. Years later, when Sebastian passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, with Arabella holding his hand, his last words were, "Thank you for teaching me to live again." And Arabella, though her heart was broken by the loss, knew that she would live loving him until her last day, because he had taught her that love can rise from the ashes, that it's never too late to start over. She lived for another 10 years, surrounded by her children, grandchildren, and eventually great-grandchildren. And every night, before falling asleep, she whispered in the darkness, "I love you, Sebastian." When she finally joined him, it was with a smile on her face and a heart that, though it had stopped beating, never ceased to love. And in the rose garden of Blackwood Hall, Catherine Fairfax's white roses and Arabella's lilies of the valley grew side by side, intertwined, a perfect metaphor for love that transcended death, connected souls, and proved that even dead hearts can learn to beat again. Dear listener, there's something deeply comforting about a love story that is reborn, isn't there? Watching Arabella and Sebastian find their way back to each other despite past wounds, perhaps you'll be reminded of the extraordinary resilience of the human heart. Their journey reflects something many of us already know to be true. Life offers unexpected second chances, often when we least expect them, and our capacity to love again remains intact even after disappointment or loss. Like Arabella, many of us have experienced disappointment. We have felt the pain of betrayal or the silent anguish of loneliness. We build walls to protect ourselves, sometimes forgetting that these same walls can prevent us from feeling both joy and pain. And, like Sebastian, some of us live believing that certain emotions are beyond our reach, that we are somehow incapable of the connections our souls most crave. But life, in its infinite wisdom, often has other plans for us. Your own story, dear listener, carries within it all the dignity and beauty of Arabella and Sebastian's romance. The challenges you faced, the losses you suffered, the moments when you had to summon a courage you didn't even know you possessed. These are not mere obstacles to be overcome. They are the very elements that shaped you into someone capable of loving deeply and truly understanding. As you rest tonight, remember that each chapter of your life has prepared you for the chapters yet to come. The wisdom you have accumulated over the years is not a burden, but a precious treasure, a collection of moments, both bright and dark, that give you the unique ability to fully savor life's sweetness and face its challenges with the strength and dignity you deserve. May you find comfort in knowing that, just like the winter snow that covered Arabella and Sebastian's wedding, even the coldest seasons of our lives eventually give way to renewal. Your heart remains as capable of warmth, connection, and yes, even passion, as it was in your youth. Perhaps even more so, tempered as it is by the wisdom of experience. Rest well tonight. Feel the protective embrace of all who love you, visible and invisible. And most importantly, remember that it's never too late to let your soul be inspired by the people and experiences that give meaning to life. Thank you for joining us to the end of this exciting journey. If this story touched your heart, we invite you to subscribe, like, comment, and share our channel. Your support inspires us to continue creating more stories of love, redemption, and breathtaking twists. Help us reach our first 2,000 subscribers, and together we will continue sharing heartwarming stories. At the end of this video, you'll see a suggestion for another of our historical stories. Click and let yourself be enchanted by another unforgettable tale. Thank you immensely. Echoes of Romance.